When did you start coding?
I was very young. I think it was like 10.
What was the first computer that you were on?
I think it was a Brazilian brand. Started with CEO Comp something. Then we had an IBM. My dad is a computer science professor, so
Oh,
I
he
was
is.
spoiled.
Okay.
Yeah, he was the first professor in the city to have access to the internet, and it was like at our home. I was the first kid to like have access to the internet and have a computer, all that stuff. Everyone else had to go to the university to gain access to it. Yeah, I was really spoiled. It
That's
was amazing.
awesome. All right, Andre, welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Jeff.
excited to have this conversation for a while. So let's start from the top. Tell everybody about Incognia.
Sure. So Incognia is in the fraud prevention space. We basically help consumer internet companies identify and distinguish between the good and bad users. So essentially, what we do is we focus on analyzing the user's devices and its behavior, particularly its location behavior, because one of the things we realized was that um, every transaction, independently on like the channel or the type of application, it has to happen from a physical device and from a physical location, right? So we focus on analyzing these two things at very in a very detailed way, and based on that, we're able to identify patterns of behavior that might be suspicious. For example, if suddenly we identify that there are multiple devices in the same apartment and all of them creating accounts on the same platform, clearly that's not the type of behavior we would expect, right?
Right.
It's very unlikely that a huge family with 20 members suddenly decide to open a bank account on the same institution the same day, right?
Right.
So this is the type of thing that we analyze to identify like large scale systematic fraud in general.
I saw like gig workers. There's some. I think you guys do a lot of stuff around like gig workers, and I was trying to understand the application of this. But like let's say I've been in a lift before where I knew it wasn't the driver.
Hmm.
They were hiding themselves. They didn't look anything like what their picture was. It looks like you guys are doing something around that as well, like with gig
Yeah,
workers. And how's that work? And what's that persona like?
yeah. The gig economy apps in general, they're most of the big ones are using us in different ways, and one of the use cases is to identify fraud on the worker side. So there are multiple things that can happen there. For example, one of the one of the issues we see a lot in these platforms are like these gig workers scamming the consumers. So for example, they would like accept to give you a ride, and then they start texting you, and then eventually they start asking for information that you don't necessarily need to provide to get that ride, right? But then they will use that information in the future to try to, for example, open an account in under your name on a financial institution, for example. We've seen that. We've seen other types of scams in which they ask for payment outside the platform, for example, and they have, if they're able to gain access to your contact information, for example, they can start doing that. Sometimes there's extortion right away from these drivers, for example. So I basically try to do is um, usually these platforms they have the policies to ban these people, right? So if some user says like, okay, I was scammed by a driver, the platform will investigate that and eventually ban that bad driver. But what happens is it's very easy for that driver to just come back with someone else's identity, right? They reach out to a friend and say like, hey, can I get your driver's license? I want to open an account on one of these platforms. They basically just open an account under someone else's name, right? And sometimes this happens at very large scale. So we help these platforms basically identify like, okay, Even though this person is presenting someone else's document, we know that the device and its behavior is related to another account that was banned before, right? So we're basically enabling these platforms to keep the bad actors out way more efficiently than what they were doing before.
Yep. And one of your main pieces is this like GPS, this ability to like identify where they're at. And that's
Yeah,
one of the like elements of security that I don't think anyone's really mastered before or figure out how to do that.
I'd say the most important thing is that the only way in which we're able to use this location data is because we have developed a proprietary location technology that is way more accurate than the GPS. So, for example, let's assume that we've identified a fraudster who lives in a high-rise building in New York where hundreds of other families live in the same complex, right? If we were relying on GPS data, we would not be able to make that distinction. So, for example, we would have to block the entire building, right, to get rid of that one bad actor. So the
Right.
false positives would be huge, and people would start calling the app and saying like, "Hey, I was blocked. I didn't do anything wrong, etc." So GPS data could not really be used for this purpose. But we have developed a technology that enables us to identify the location down to the apartment level. So we're able to say like, okay, any device that we see from this apartment
Yep.
specifically is related to fraud. So we're not going to accept any new accounts being created from this location, right? But everyone else who lives in that building will still be able to use the service normally.
So I'm really fascinated about technology and what network is it riding on? Is it like a data network, cellular network?
Yeah, so what we do is our customers they implement an SDK into their application, and this SDK is basically our technology collecting data from the device, and then we process that data to identify the location and other things. So basically, what we do is we capture data from many signals on the mobile device, including GPS, but also like cell tower IDs, Bluetooth networks, Wi-Fi networks, etc. And we create an equivalent to a fingerprint, but for a physical location, right? So, for
Right.
example, here there is a unique fingerprint of Wi-Fi signals and Bluetooth signals. So, for example, these AirPods here, they're generating a signal. My Wi-Fi router right there is generating another signal. My neighbor's Wi-Fi is also generating another signal, but a weaker signal than my Wi-Fi, for example. So, at this location, there is a unique set of signals that are not available anywhere else, right? So we create this fingerprint and then we're able to learn what this means to each user. So for example, if I'm here every night, we will conclude that my device lives here and this is my home, right? So if
Right.
I'm trying to open a bank account, for example, and when I scan my driver's license, the address that is presented on that driver's license matches the current location I'm at, the likelihood that this is a legitimate bank account is much higher, right? So we can tell the bank, okay, this is a secure account. This is not a fraudster trying to impersonate someone. So eventually, if this person tries to like apply for a loan, for example, the chances that person succeeding are much higher because we're going to say like this is a good account. But if I was a fraudster and I took your driver's license, I bought it online, for example, like most of these data sets are out there for sale, right? And if I tried to apply for a loan under your name, I would be basically stealing your money, right? And your credit score, etc. We would flag that to the bank, like this is not Jeff, because we know that the information is not matching here. Um, and the way we do this is without in like identifying the user. So we don't even know like the name, the social security number, your email address, your phone number. It's all about the device and its behavior. And the only party who knows who you are is the application, the bank, the food delivery app, the e-commerce app, etc.
Right.
So we're able to do that in a anonymized way as well.
That's one thing that would be really hard to get around is actually being in that location trying to do that fraud.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
is like probably one of the most impossible things to probably try to get around. Well, what I think is really fascinating about your story too is like where you guys originated this technology, but didn't know where you're going to apply this, right? Like,
Yeah.
isn't that the story? Like, this goes
Hmm.
back a business before Incognia. right? Can you tell the
Yeah.
story of like how the technology came about and what you guys were doing at the time?
Yeah, sure. So it started as a research project. My colleagues and I, we were um, at the university. We were studying computer science, and as part of the course, there is this um, moment in which everybody has to work on it's kind of a startup project, and we were uh, like starting to do some research in like location technologies, and we were like, okay, let's try to build an application. And this was back in 2010. Let's try to build an application that will understand your location and will automatically open the service on your app that would be most useful to you depending on where you are. So, for example, if you arrived at a restaurant, your phone would automatically download and open the menu from that restaurant when you
Right.
arrived, right? Or if you arrived at an airport, for example, it would download the map and show where you are and guide you to whatever you need to go, right? So it will basically automate a bunch of tasks based on the context. And then we started developing this. We realized that GPS would not be enough for this
Yeah.
application. So this is when we started building
They call
this
this
more,
geofencing. Is that
yeah.
geofencing? Yeah, when you
Hmm.
get in the proximity, then you can do different activities or
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, this is what we realized. Like the traditional geofence would not be good enough for this because, for example, let's say like in one place there was a restaurant and right next door there was a like bank branch, for example, right?
Right.
Very different applications. You would not want to offer the menu to who was at the bank, vice versa. So so basically, we had to like really nail like, okay, the user is right here at this place, and the GPS was not good enough. So we had to build a better technology for this application, and then we encountered a second technical challenge, which was um, we later on realized that the app stores would not allow this app because we were basically like opening other applications dynamically, which
Hmm.
would be kind of a more of a function of the operating system, and the only way to do that was to hack the app store. So we would be banned. So we're like, okay, this idea will not work. We need to think about something else, but we have developed this location technology that is much better than GPS. So what do we do with this? Like we should double down and try to find an application for it. And then we started like pivoting and we try to fill ideas that failed. um, First one was to build like applications for shopping malls so we could use the location technology to help people navigate inside. No one wanted to pay for it. The shopping malls, we later on realized that shopping malls wanted to help you get lost, not,
Right.
not the
They want to get
opposite.
you to the back of the store, right? So you buy a whole bunch of
Exactly.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So that was one. Then we built kind of a Google Maps for like indoor locations. So think like shopping malls or airports, etc., like big venues where it was hard to navigate. That idea also failed. And then finally, we had a conversation with an e-commerce company, and they were like, "Oh, we think that we could use your technology to identify shoppers who are at physical stores that compete with us,
Hmm.
and then we could advertise like similar products to them when they were shopping in the physical world." And we were like, "Okay, that sounds like an idea." So that was the first idea that actually took off in terms of like gaining traction as a business. 3 years later, like and this whole journey that I told you here was like 3 4 years, but no revenue, no traction, nothing happened until then. When we launched this new product, 3 years later, we were generating like tens of millions of dollars a year, and it was a fantastic business, became profitable, etc.
How many employees
Um,
did you guys have at that time?
200 and almost 250 at the
Yeah.
time. So it scaled quite quickly, and then everything crashed suddenly when
COVID
the
happened.
pandemic
Yeah.
started. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So what happened during that time was, even though our first customer was when it was an e-commerce company, most of our customers actually were physical stores. They were using our product to advertise to people who were nearby, and bring them to the store. And we were able to count how many people actually came inside
Oh, wow.
and spend time inside your store. So it was similar to like AdWords, but for the physical world, right? We were bringing, instead of bringing people to your website, we were bringing people to your physical store. So that was amazing. But then when the pandemic hit, obviously physical stores had to shut down. And then in March 2020, we saw our revenues dropping by 95%. And I had like
Wow.
just moved from Brazil to the US to start expanding the business here.
Right.
Um, so it was very chaotic moment.
That must have been really tough. Now, what, were you guys self-funded up to that point, or did you have investors?
No, we had investors. We had investors. We had raised a little over $30 million dollars in funding until that point.
Right.
And we actually had like just raised our Series B for the legacy business, right? So everything crashed, and we were like, okay, we're sitting on this money. We have a huge team here. What do we do? First thing was obviously we had to reduce costs, right? So we had to downsize quite aggressively.
Yep.
But we also had to build another product because we knew that with the product we had at the time, we would not survive. We didn't know how long the pandemic was going to last, et cetera. Um, so we had to adapt quickly. And then, like, I was already working on this idea for a few years on how could we use the location technology for fraud and security use cases, right? And it was basically like, okay, this is the best idea we have at the moment. We have to build something different. So what we did was we downsized the company quite aggressively, but we maintained a big part of the engineering team
Mm.
because we had to ship a product very quickly. And in 6 months later, we had a new product. We were launching Incognia, and then Incognia took off more quickly than the previous business. Now it's
Right.
much bigger than the previous business, but it was very close to going out of business.
That's incredible. And I would guess that pain of making that big pivot provided a lot of focus for you
Oh yeah,
guys.
for sure.
How did you navigate that?
It was crazy because um, I thought that most of the people who stayed on were going to leave, and actually the vast majority decided to stay. So that was quite surprising because like during the pandemic, like all the big companies, they were hiring like crazy. Was a lot of demand for like any online related service. So people were like getting offers, etc., and they still remained. So that was fantastic. That was a big reason why we succeeded. Um, I'd say, yeah, being very focused helped a lot. One of the things we did was we didn't have time to waste on like building the product. So for example, we said like, look, we're going to have the engineers joining every sales call because we can't have proxies here,
Right.
right? So we're just putting the engineers in front of customers, and they were asking all the questions, and we were building the product for those initial customers. And and then we deployed with the first one. It was a bank. The result was fantastic. We were able to help them reduce the amount of accounts that they have had to review manually by 70%. So it was a very good improvement to their
Oh, wow.
operation. And then the second customer was also a bank. We were able to help them reduce account takeover fraud by 95%. And and when I looked at that data, it was interesting because um, I asked the team to filter by the users that had location enabled. And when we look at that subset of users, the fraud rate was zero. And it's still zero until now. Like 4 years later, it's still zero. So we realized like, okay, this idea of like bringing this new layer of data, which is our location signal, really can change the game here when it comes to fraud prevention. So that was the moment for me that it clicked like, okay, this is going to work. Now I have to work on scaling up the company because
Right.
we have a product here. We have a really strong product.
What have you done different with this stage of the business versus the last one? Because I think what you said before is like, uh, you have more revenue now and probably less employees, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And what were some of the lessons learned from the first stage and then the second stage with the new product?
Yeah. Well, going through that uh, near-death experience changed a lot of stuff. So I'd say the first thing is we're now a lot more focused. Um, like one idea, one product, one type of customer. So for example, we don't even sell to like smaller companies right now. Like we only sell to very large enterprises. We have very well-defined industries that we focus on. So like gig economy, financial services, e-commerce, that's it. We don't try to sell to any other industry, at least for now. Um, so we're very selective about the things we do, the use cases we cover. Sometimes we have customers asking like, "Oh, you guys are doing such a great job. Why don't you start investing in facial recognition?" We're like, "No, we're not a facial recognition company. We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
We're focused on device and location, and that's all."
Yeah.
So I'd say that was the primary thing, like focus. Second was, um, I'd say maintaining like a um, very strong investment in technology. One of the things we realized was that in this industry, very few companies were actually founded by engineers, which was quite surprising to me. Like I thought that most companies in cybersecurity and fraud prevention would be founded and led by engineers, but that's not the case. So we saw the opportunity here there to like really invest heavily on the product side, and it paid off. Um, and and yeah, I'd say those were the primary things, but focus is way up there in terms of what changed.
Yeah, I see a lot of teams if they go through that and almost hit the bottom, their focus becomes laser focus. And I
Yeah.
think, I always tell teams like, I think part of the role of the CEO is to be very capital efficient, right? Like your role
Hmm.
is to make the right bets and stay focused on those bets. But I think in the early stages with some companies, when they're still trying to figure out who's our ideal customer profile, what is our product, is there product fit, what's this look like? I think oftentimes they tend to do too many experiments that are not closed loop
Hmm.
experiments, right?
Yeah.
And they're trying a lot of different things that they never tried before. One of those things is for me is like the operating system. They're kind of trying to invent everything when some things don't need to be reinvented, I
Yeah.
think. And
Hmm.
they can be very uh, loose with the money. And especially when times are good, I find teams tend to lose focus even when times are good because things are great. So we don't have to be really tight. But I think for all real successful teams, they're very capital efficient. They're very focused
Hmm.
with their money, making the right bets. And even in the fastest growth times, like you want to put the money where it's going to multiply.
Yeah.
There's never a
Exactly.
time to waste money, I think. And I think a lot of people think venture capital means, spend lot of money, waste a lot of money, and see what happens. But I think all the companies that I've been in that have been successful, that's not the case for those companies.
Even like relationship with like VCs, et cetera, like this is all changed. So for example, in a previous company, like every time I got an email from a VC, I would take the meeting. Nowadays, it's like, no, we're really focused. Let's
Right.
reconnect next year, because like our time is very important, and we have to be in the operation, like helping the teams make the best decisions and like helping the sales team drive business, etc. Like I've been spending a lot more time with customers nowadays than I was before, for example.
Are you still having the engineers in those meetings with customers and
Yep,
and really pulling those requirements and developing the products?
exactly.
That's awesome. Now you going back to technology, it goes way back. Like when did you start coding? You.
Oh, yeah, I was very young. I think it was like 10 or something. My dad is a computer science professor, so
Oh,
I
he
was
is.
bored.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I was the first kid to like have access to the internet and have a computer, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
that helped a lot.
Where in Brazil did you grow up?
In Recife, it's in the northeast.
Okay. And what kind of computers were playing around your house? Like what was the first computer that you were on?
Yeah, I think it was a Brazilian brand called started with CEO comp something.
Okay.
Um, and then we had an IBM computer. Um, but yeah, we had several. Like my dad used to, and he wasn't in the networking space. So like internet, for example, I think he was the first professor in the city to have access to the internet, and it was like at our home. Like so, everyone else had to go to the university to gain access to it, and we had it at home. So yeah, I was really spoiled. It
That's
was amazing.
awesome. That's awesome. Has your dad had any impact on your business? Does he understand what you guys are doing? Is he involved?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, um, this first idea where we were like trying to identify the location and basically open up like the right application automatically. This came from a paper that he shared with me from a guy here from Silicon Valley called Mark Weiser. The name of
Okay.
the paper was the computer for the 21st century, and basically he described like this stage in which computing would be so advanced that it would feel like just natural, like just an extension of our life, and we would not notice that computers were around us. They would just be serving us. So this whole idea of like automating everything around us was it came from this paper that my dad shared with me. So yeah, he had tremendous impact for sure.
That's so cool. That's so cool to have that like legacy built in the business and that history and DNA. I think that's so cool.
Yep.
Did you found it with other co-founders, or are you just solo founder, or what's
Yeah,
that look
it
like?
was a big team. Actually, six co-founders. It's funny, like a lot of people ask, like, how can we get along for so long? But we've been working together since 2009. Like
Yep.
we created this group when we were still like working on the first few projects, and we've been working together since then. It's been amazing working with them. So it's
And
a
you
very
guys,
like highly technical team.
yeah, highly technical. It sounds it's highly
Yeah.
technical, and it's yeah, like you said before, like a lot of the and I work with a lot of security companies. A lot of them come from see the business application side before they see the technology application side. And
Hmm.
so they're bringing in the engineering and the product talent to help build the products versus that they believe that they need versus coming from it with something that was really an innovation. Like truly an innovation is what you guys did. And I think a lot of the companies I work with are always doing things, building things that have never been built before. I would say sometimes they're incremental things, and I think
Hmm.
then there's times where I work with teams that have really actually innovated greatly, and it's really cool to see how that can come together. Because frankly, I remember doing handheld mobile technology, geofencing stuff in the late '90s. Looks very different than today, right? And I remember,
Yeah.
the first WAP book I read, and it's like the technology is so different. You could see the stuff coming, but in every kind of era, you could like probably spin a wheel of an industry and spin a wheel of a technology and put the two together and see what you can actually create with it. And you had that technology piece, and I was like, okay, where's this going to fit? Where's this going to
Yeah.
fit in a different industry? And to be able to find something
Listen.
and pivot so quick, I think that story is incredible.
Yeah, it was interesting because I actually wanted to pivot earlier. Like
Mm,
I had the idea about Incognia um, in 2017, but we only pivoted in 2020, and it was interesting because even though I was leading the company, I was the CEO of the company at the time. Um, there was so much going on in the current business that it was hard for me to like convince people like let's just pivot, like
right.
everybody looked at me like this guy's crazy, like we had
It's
a
already working.
fantastic business, it's
Right.
growing, it's profitable, why does it want to do that? And then suddenly like complete chaos, everybody looks at me like what do we do now? Well,
Yeah, I think that's cool you had the opportunity to do it in unfortunate circumstances, but like you went from helping people sell more things to helping, security and safety, and I feel like the value proposition is so much greater in what you guys are
mhm,
doing
for
today.
sure. Yeah,
Because somebody could
I
go
feel
back
much
and do
better
what you were
about it.
doing before, but now you're like making a really positive impact, I think. I
Absolutely.
think, which is
Absolutely.
which is really interesting. For earlier stage founders that are still trying to figure out that product market fit and they're sitting there as the CEO founder, like what advice would you give
I'd say when the company is trying to find product market fit, the CEO is
them?
the main role of the CEO is actually the head of sales because you need to be speaking to customers directly. You can't outsource that. Um, Otherwise, you're not going to find product market fit. Like you're the only person who can speak um, like product and business at the same time, um, and make the important decisions that will shape your product to get there. So um, you have to be both head of sales and head of product until you find that. Then you can outsource. I think then you can like, okay, now I need to scale up the company, build a sales engine, etc. Then you start bringing more people around you. But until you find product market fit, like that's your primary responsibility. So um, you have to be on every sales call and you have to be on every product decision until you find it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And then once it becomes a more of a team of teams, you still find yourself in probably a lot of those meetings, I would guess,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And you're really
Yep.
that
This
conduit.
year I traveled over 300,000 miles to meet customers.
Yeah.
So for sure.
You have to be in it. You have to be in it to win it, right? Now, is the team spread out between the US and Brazil still, or what's the where is the
Yeah,
geographic?
it's US, Brazil, and Dubai.
Okay.
So we do have like a lot of customers in Asia and in Europe, and managing these accounts uh, from California, like the time zone just doesn't work.
Right.
So yeah, basically like the Dubai offices took over like primarily Asia because of the time zone, so it's more of a customer support um, office. Brazil is primarily engineering, and then here in the US is the go-to-market team. So that's how we're organized.
What are some of the challenges of like scaling a global company? Because
Yeah,
you guys move
I'd
pretty
say
quick, right?
yeah, yeah, I'd say for us it was probably easier than it is for most companies because we already had like a pretty big and solid team. So just
Okay.
to give you a sense, like on the engineering side, like the average tenure today is over 5 years. Very few companies have that, right? Like people are moving to companies every 6 months, et cetera. So it's very hard to keep the same cohesive like team.
Yeah.
So that enabled us to move a lot faster because like people knew each other, they knew how to work with each other. So that was a lot easier, and it made the transition from like working in an office to working remotely much easier. If I were starting a company today, I would actually invest a lot and if it was like a fully remote company, I would be investing a lot in like bringing these people together frequently, so that we created those connections because only in person you can create these stronger connections and have like more candid conversations about what needs to be done, what needs to be fixed. So I would bring these people together very frequently.
Yeah. I think remote's great because you can get a lot of people working in a lot of different areas, and that can you open up your ability in the net to recruit the right people with the right fit
Yeah.
and the right values and all those things. But I do sessions with teams, all the teams that I work with. Every 90 days we're getting the team together, and honestly, I primarily work with venture backed technology companies, but not all.
Mhm.
But all of them we're flying these people in together. Like
Yeah.
almost all the teams are somewhat remote or majority remote or partially remote. But getting them together and not doing those sessions on Zoom is so important.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
when I was doing what I did when the recession hit, all my activities and all these client sessions went to Zoom, and we were
Hmm.
able to maintain. But the value of getting together with somebody and having those conversations at dinner or in between sessions,
Yeah.
it's just so important. I think it's so important. But
Yeah.
and then you have to
Exactly.
create the right structure outside of that continue that communication and that cadence of communication. I think so important.
Yeah, I'd say the other two things that we changed when we migrated to becoming a remote first company was we started investing a lot more in the onboarding process for new employees, and also investing a lot more in training, even
Mm.
for the existing team members. Um, so yeah, these two were very important. The other is documentation, having everything like written written down and shared with the teams, also extremely important.
All right. Well, I hit you with a lot of questions. Before I give you the last question, I'm gonna open it up and let you ask me a question.
Sure. Say, based on all the things you asked me, and my answers, like, um, are we very far off from the things you typically see, or any big patterns that you see on what we did in our journey?
Well, I've seen so many different journeys. I love. I know it was painful, but I love the story of like having to pivot so hard. Like, because I see a lot of teams, we're always making macro pivots every once in a while, and then we a ton of micro pivots, obviously, right? Like, I think what you guys have done is like incredible. And then both stages of the business had very quick growth, right? And so the ability to keep those employees and keep them aligned and focused, I think, has been tremendous. So, like, I think you guys are doing all the right stuff. Of course,
Good to
I'd
hear.
love to learn more, and I'm sure there's areas that we could help keep that path, quickly. But I think from all the companies that I work with, and I've seen a lot of different things. Like, it sounds like a healthy environment for people, and it sounds like a high growth environment, not only for the business but probably their employees as well.
Fantastic.
And it
That's
sounds
great
like
to hear.
a good environment for those people. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like the best people will go to the best opportunities,
Yep,
right? And so
for
if
sure.
if you can show that your people are staying, that means that they feel like they're in a good spot. I mean, I think it's kind of as simple as that. And some of the stuff that you alluded to, and from our conversations in the past too, of like how you are focused on that communication and that cadence of communication is so important. And I love the idea of like engineers sitting in sales meetings. I think you're not going to get your communication's not going to get lost in that. And
Yeah.
all the engineers always are just very curious what they're building, not only what they're building but why.
Hmm.
And hearing that firsthand, I think, is so cool. It's really cool.
Yep,
All right, so I
exactly.
have one last question for you. It's probably the most important question that you've ever been asked in your life. So I'm glad you're sitting down. So it's more of a scenario, and the scenario is this: you are stranded on a desert island the rest of your life. You have plenty of food and water, shelter, let's even say healthcare. You got everything taken care of. However, there's one thing that's missing, and that one thing is entertainment. You have no entertainment at all, unfortunately. So, however, an old 80s boombox radio drifts ashore with endless batteries, but you can only choose one album to listen to the rest of your life. Just one album
Oh
of
boy.
any genre, any era. I know it's at an 80s boombox, but it could be a modern album if you want. But you only get to choose one album. Andre, what album are you gonna bring?
Pulse live from Pink Floyd.
Oh, I don't think anyone's seen Pink Floyd yet. That's great. That's a great answer. Very specific too. I like that. I like that a lot. I don't know. I love Pink Floyd, but they can be a little depressing. I don't know if you want to listen to that the rest of your life, but like it's your choice, and I love
Yeah,
that you are
well,
very
the
specific
the
about it.
live the live versions are a bit more, I'd say, intense. So
I did see them once in 1995 in Chicago. I think it was. I
that's
think I
awesome.
only saw one Pink Floyd show, but I think it was like 94, 95 in Soldier Field, Chicago. It was an incredible show. I mean,
Yeah, well, I have to
their
say that there
live
was
stuff is
another,
incredible. It really
yeah,
is.
yeah. That was another big influence from my dad, was my music preferences for sure.
Oh, really? So is it
Yeah,
like a lot
yeah,
of rock, like
yeah. Hmm.
70s, 80s rock?
Yeah,
How about
yeah,
Led Zeppelin and
exactly.
Hendrix and all that type of stuff?
Hmm. Yeah,
all that stuff's good. All right, good answer. I'm glad someone finally said Pink Floyd. I've asked this question probably 100 times. No Pink Floyd. So you won today if you ask me. But all right, well, thanks for joining me on the show. It was awesome having you.
likewise. Thanks for having me.
All
It was
right.
great to chat.